Hello everyone, welcome to the fanfic. What if Naruto appeared in the world of Bleach and fell in love with Orihime? If you enjoy this fanfic, please like and subscribe for more chapters. Without further ado, enjoy.
Equals immediately after the last chapter equals. Naruto let out what must have been his 17th inaudible sigh of the first period. He had to keep reminding himself that this was a new dimension and that meant learning new things, but sweet Kami, the teacher, was teaching math, which was obviously multidimensional. He didn't care how attractive she looked, her teaching style was just a bit boring. The only subject he really needed to learn was history, at the very least. Anything else would be a waste of time. Just then the bell rang, and the teacher put down her chalk and announced that it was lunchtime and that we'd see each other afterward. He was sure she was speaking specifically to him for that reason, but oh well, if it got him out of there, he'd accept it. He slowly stood up from his seat and looked around. Almost all the students were taking bento boxes out of their backpacks. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his stomach. He had nothing to eat. His stomach chose that moment to rumble and announce its sorrow. What I wouldn't give for a bowl of ramen right now, Naruto thought as he slowly left the classroom, rubbing his stomach sadly. He didn't know how or why, but after leaving the classroom, he found himself on the school roof. Uzumaki-san, haven't you had lunch? Asked an innocent voice to Naruto's right. The blonde boy looked around to see two groups, one of boys and one of girls, and being the person he was thanks to his late sensei, he sat down next to the girls. He watched the group of girls who were busy staring at Orihime, not at all surprised that she was being kind, especially to someone she didn't even know. Naruto smiled slightly and shook his head. No, I don't know. Thanks for noticing. Naruto remained silent, not knowing her name. Oh, my name is Orihime Inoue. This is Tatsuki Arisawa, and the others are Chizuru, Michiru, Mihana, and Ryo, Orihime said with a wide smile as she placed an octopus tentacle on his face. I'll share it with you. I always make some for my friends, but they never want to eat any, she offered, waving the tentacle in front of his face. Her friends were frightened to learn that everything Orihime did was strange, even if it had an appearance of normality. Naruto ignored their stares as his stomach growled before allowing Orihime to give it to him. He chewed for a couple of long seconds before his face lit up with delight. This is delicious, he said, as the cheerful girl's face lit up along with his. Behind them, their friends watched in disgust as they ate Orihime's peculiar food. It was then that Naruto finally glanced toward the corner of the rooftop to silently observe the young woman who seemed to be watching his area. Who is that? The blonde wondered, knowing that something was off about the girl, not only because she was wearing an outfit that resembled a black kimono and was wielding a sword. I wonder. Naruto continued thinking as his energy flowed a little, before cutting it off completely. The slight opening of her eyes and the tension in her muscles betrayed her when their eyes met. Though it was as if she hesitated deeply. She frowned before jumping. Naruto mentally shrugged to avoid arousing suspicion about what he was saying. With his mind cleared of the mysterious people around him, he focused on befriending these women. Although he sensed that the redhead didn't like his closeness with Orihime. So he resolved to make her jealous, especially since he was starting to like the busty girl. She reminded him of himself when he was younger, and there was nothing wrong with that. 5 hours later, Naruto didn't know how he'd managed to get through the day without losing his mind, but being stuck in that class was a drag. However, he had to admit he'd keep going, if only to see Orihime. Her kind heart reminded him so much of Hinata that it wasn't even funny, that, and the fact that she was incredibly intelligent, even if she was extremely dim-witted. It was around 6 o'clock when Naruto left the library. But school ended at 4, which meant Naruto spent 3 extra hours reading books in the library. There were so many books that it was like reliving his shinobi career. Especially the part where he read jutsu scrolls and battle tactics books. The blonde boy sighed as he carried a stack of textbooks. There were 4 in his arms, and the worst part was that he had nowhere to put them. I need to find Sasuke. I'm pretty sure he's got somewhere to stay. He hasn't moved in the last 6 hours, Naruto said. The fastest way to get there would be with a body flicker technique, but honestly, using low-level techniques would be harder than high-level ones. He wouldn't use it for that purpose until he experimented with this new energy, but high-level techniques were fine, judging by their previous fight. Well, he wouldn't use it for that reason, and because it would still scare people. The blond man looked up at the majestic sun. It must be spring, because he also saw a lot of flowers around the city. The sun looked spectacular as it set. That was something he was glad hadn't changed, the only difference was the location. Look what we have here, boys. A fresh face we can ruin. And look, he even has weird hair like that bastard Ichigo, said a tough-looking boy as he and 3 others surrounded Naruto. What's wrong, Narcissus? Did you lose a bet or something? Asked another one who looked like a gangster. I say we cut it up before throwing it in the river, said the third thug as he pulled out a knife. Naruto lazily looked ahead to see that a bridge was approaching, and indeed there was a river. There's no way out, Blondie, so I suggest you take it like a man. And try not to scream too much, said the last tough-looking guy as they all carried on. Naruto sighed as he placed both hands on either side of his stack of books to keep them from falling to the floor. They were as good as new. Legs, don't let me down now, he thought as he dodged and kicked anyone who came near. The first 2 fell instantly. He realized the boy with the knife was charging and quickly moved his head out of the way of the blows, kicking him sideways in the knee to avoid serious injury. The teenager doubled over, giving Naruto the opportunity to kick the knife away, sending it flying. Without pausing for a moment, she immediately dropped her leg onto the guy's shoulder, slamming him to the ground. Naruto yawned deeply as he faced the last thug. Forget about this guy, I'm outta here, said the thug, who seemed to have regained some sense as he tried to turn and run. By now, Naruto was getting incredibly bored with his pathetic performance. So, with a quick burst of speed, he appeared behind the guy, his foot propped against the side of his head, sending him flying sideways into a building. He had thought about simply throwing one of the unconscious thugs at the fugitive, but that wouldn't have been fun. Would it have been? Naruto thought thoughtfully. It was at that precise moment that the blond boy realized how tired he was. Damn teacher, he won't let me sleep in class. It's not my fault Orihime's lunch filled me up so much. His stomach growled strangely, as if it were proving Naruto right. The blond boy patted his stomach contentedly before starting to think aloud. I wonder if Sasuke has anything to eat, he said as his feet unconsciously began to move faster. Kurosaki Clinic. Hi everyone, I'm home, said the tall, orange-haired boy as he entered his house, only to receive a kick in the face, surprisingly from his own father. Why are you coming home so late? You know dinner is at 7 o'clock sharp, said the father after laughing triumphantly. Ichigo grunted as he stood up and quickly returned his father's punch. What the hell is wrong with you? No other father hits his children all the time. And for your information, I was busy. Son, you know you always have to be on your guard. Never let your guard down, because the consequences are terrible, said Ishin, Ichigo's father, proudly, as he and his son began to comically fight in the dining room. Hey Ichigo, eat your dinner before it gets cold, said Ichigo's younger sister, Yuzu, holding a wooden spoon and pouting on her face. Karen, the middle daughter, continued eating her rice indifferently. The 2 boys were too busy fighting and arguing to listen. Ah, let them fight, Yuzu, you know, Dad. He does it every day, she said between bites. Ichigo, you have another one, she added. Ichigo stopped fighting long enough to see a ghost floating behind him. When you get here. Go away, he said, trying to shoo the specter away. I can only sense them. I think it's great that you 2 can see them. Two-san is the only one who can't, Yuzu said, smiling. I don't believe in ghosts, Karen said, staring at her sister. This surprised Yuzu. How can you not believe in them, when you can see them? Yuzu questioned her brother. Karen continued to appear indifferent to the subject. Just because I can see them, does that mean I shouldn't believe in them, she said coldly. Finally, Ichigo gave up trying to get the ghost out of his sight. Luckily, he surrendered just in time, because he and his father clashed simultaneously. Ishin slowly slid out of his son's fist and collapsed to the floor. Forget dinner, I'm going to bed, the high school student said as he picked up his backpack and headed upstairs. Yuzu started pouting even more as she watched her brother leave without dinner. It's your fault, Dad, Karen said, prompting Ishin to comically ask why. CD. Ichigo lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. I still can't figure out who that girl was. Where did she come from, and what was wrong with that monster? Ichigo thought as he began to replay the events of the past hour. Suddenly, a black-winged butterfly appeared above his face, through the open window. He watched it flap its wings and fly to the center of his room. Suddenly, a girl seemed to materialize through the wall and stood on his desk. It was the same girl he'd seen earlier, when the ghost girl had been attacked. "Who are you?" Ichigo whispered. Unfortunately, his question was ignored, as the girl, with a natural and cautious air, jumped off the desk. Suddenly, she placed her hand on the hilt of the sword, startling Ichigo. "Who the hell are you? What do you want?" he shouted as he quickly retreated toward the wall, as far away as possible from the mysterious girl with the sword. Once again, his questions went unanswered, and that was starting to infuriate him, judging by the mark forming on his forehead. "It's close," he said as he scanned the room. "What the hell are you talking about?" Ichigo yelled loudly as he kicked the raven-haired girl in the back. "First, you suddenly appear in my room. Now you're talking nonsense. I asked you who you were." Ichigo finished yelling, pointing at the fallen girl. "Can you see me?" the short girl asked somewhat meekly from her place on the floor. "Of course I see you, I just kicked you." "Are you out of your mind or something?" the high school student said, frowning. The girl dressed in black stood up and quickly grabbed the 15-year-old boy's chin, observing him curiously, fascinated that he was looking at her. "How strange. They don't usually see me," she said, moving her chin from side to side with considerable intrigue. "Stop talking nonsense," Ichigo said angrily as he tried to kick the girl. The key word was "tried," because she, smoothly and gracefully, jumped over him and then onto his head, where she knocked him off his feet completely. Ichigo mumbled incoherently as he lay face down on the ground. "Well, you asked who I was, I'll tell you. I'm a Shinigami, Soul Reaper." The streets of Karakura. In the streets of the Dark Sky Village stood a young woman. This young woman was not ordinary. She was the same young ghost Ichigo had protected before. She ran in terror as the echo of footsteps rumbled behind her, leaving large footprints that betrayed the weight of her pursuer. The distortion in the air cleared to reveal another monster. This one stopped and sniffed. "There's so much delicious food. 2 at each place. I'll go for the closest one," it said, completely ignoring the solitary spirit it was chasing. Its new destination was the Kurosaki Clinic. Equals with Naruto equals. Naruto groaned in frustration as he knocked on Sasuke's apartment door for the 300th time. "Come on, open the damn door," Naruto said in a hushed shout. He could feel the seals around the house, keeping away unwanted signatures, which he knew were his. "For the last time, Dobe, leave." Sasuke shouted from the other side of the door. "Come on, Uchiha, stop being stingy. I know you have 2 rooms there," Naruto said, banging on the door harder. "How did you know?" Sasuke said, frowning. Naruto smiled unconsciously at the door. "For 2 reasons. 1, you have seals all over your apartment. I'm not a seal master for nothing, I know the entire layout of your apartment thanks to your seals. And 2, your landlord told me about it when I said we were roommates, and he was too busy to be with you when you searched the room. He thought it was complicated, but he ignored it when he saw my uniform," Naruto explained. Sasuke remained silent for a moment. "Also, I have some tomatoes for you. I know you didn't have anything to eat. So here's my offering," Naruto added as his clone ran toward him with a bag of tomatoes. Although Naruto couldn't see the old Avenger's face, he knew it lit up with a faint smile. "How exactly did you know I liked tomatoes?" Sasuke asked, unable to hide the happiness and hunger in his voice. Naruto's smile morphed into a smug smirk. "How naive, Sasuke. You know perfectly well there's a file on everyone." I felt a pang of nostalgia after taking the hat and going through the old team's files. The blonde boy was proud of having achieved his most cherished goal. Now his face would be forever etched on the Hokage mountain, alongside those of his father, Sarutobi, his grandfather, and Tsunade, his mother/grandmother. Undoubtedly, Kakashi took the hat after him. After all, if the rumors were true, he was supposed to be the sixth Hokage, but he had knowingly declined, shirking the responsibility of leading an entire village. But now that he's the seventh Hokage, he'll probably try to get the Kunoichi to wear miniskirts. I should have, Naruto thought with a perverted chuckle. Although he had spent less time as Kage than his father, he felt it was all the time he needed to gain the leadership experience he truly required. Being in this dimension didn't bother him as much as he had thought. However, he would miss being with Gaara and being called the youngest Kage in history. It was a shame they hadn't been able to send him with them. That would have made his time here much more pleasant, even with his apathetic nature. Damn it, loser, could you stop staring into space and come over here already? The old Kage heard as he noticed the weight in his arms had vanished. He glanced inside the apartment and saw the books on the coffee table and the bag, now empty, of one of the occupants. And why do you have books? What the hell did you do after we left the park? Why didn't you offer me tomatoes when we got here? Sasuke asked between bites, but his last question held a hint of anger. Ugh, don't remind me, Naruto said, sinking down onto the sofa. And besides, my clone just got back with the offerings, he added, leaning into one of the sofa cushions. You know I can find out any time you want, right? Sasuke said with a mocking smile as his eyes reddened for a moment. He waited only to hear snores. Sasuke looked at him with a serious expression and stopped mid-bite to look at his former teammate. Whatever, he said, grabbing the bag of tomatoes and leaving the room. The next day, Naruto woke up with a yawn, rubbing his messy hair. He glanced at his pillow and saw a large drool stain. He looked around before quickly flipping the pillow over and whistling for a few seconds. I don't know why you're trying to hide it, I saw it develop when I finished dinner last night, Naruto heard behind him. He acted quickly and threw the pillow at his roommate. The pillow hit Sasuke squarely in the face, as he had no time to react due to the short distance between them and the blonde's unpredictability. The pillow slid slowly, gradually revealing Sasuke's angry face. You'd better thank Kami I didn't make you drool, dope. Anyway, I'm going to beat the crap out of you, he said, punching Naruto in the back of the head. Naruto groaned as he rubbed his head. What time is it? I feel like I just came out of hibernation. Why are you going to be late for school? Sasuke asked with a mocking smile. The blonde boy shrugged. It depends on the time. Sasuke glared at him before pointing at the wall clock behind him. 7:34. I don't have class until 9, Naruto said, standing up and stretching, cracking his neck and back, and creaking a few joints. That couch was uncomfortably comfortable. Sasuke was heading to the kitchen when he said that. Upon hearing it, he stopped dead in his tracks and slowly looked behind him. He had an expression that said, "What the hell did you just say?" The blonde boy with sideburns rubbed the back of his neck shyly. Sorry, it didn't make sense, he said before a feeling overwhelmed him and he ran to the bathroom. Sasuke shook his head at the sound of liquid clinking against liquid. When are you going to tell me why you're going to school? Sasuke called from the kitchen. The blonde groaned from the bathroom, but Sasuke couldn't tell if it was because of his activity or if he was refusing. If you do, I'll make you ramen, he bribed him. The liquid stopped flowing, and silence fell. Then the bathroom door opened, followed shortly by the kitchen door. There stood Naruto, frowning, his index finger pointing. You can't even cook ramen to save your life, instant doesn't count, and you know it, Naruto added just as Sasuke was about to speak. Sasuke glared at the blonde boy, his Sharingan activated with rage. You know, we're going to have to test this new energy properly. Because if I know you, and I do know you, you're going to have trouble controlling it, the raven-haired teenager said with a mocking smile. Naruto returned his gaze, his eyes flashing crimson. You and I both know we can't fight just anywhere. This world is completely tame compared to our rebellious world. If anyone sees our power, widespread panic is guaranteed. Sasuke didn't let his smile fade. That's why we'll look for an uninhabited place to train. Somewhere far from this village, preferably in the desert. Now it was Naruto's turn to smile smugly. Thanks to the geography book I read at the library yesterday, I know the perfect spot, he said, patting himself on the back. Sasuke laughed indifferently. Okay. Let's make this interesting. If I win, you have to tell me how you got into the school and why you stayed. Sasuke shrugged, as it was all he could think about at that moment. Naruto smirked. Okay, and if I win, you have to come to school with me. Because, I won't lie, it's pretty boring, and I don't want to be the only one who has to suffer through the boredom in this new place, Naruto said, grinning smugly as his eyes regained their blue hue. Sasuke looked at him with disapproval, but after a couple of minutes of discussion, he gave in, arms crossed. Fine, but you can't send clones to replace you, the Uchiha said, glaring at the blonde. The blonde man merely frowned, but secretly wanted to bang his head against the wall because he'd completely forgotten he could make clones. Deal, he said, creating a clone as they left the building. I'll have the clone perform a Hyrule seal so we can head back immediately, he added, leading the way west. Wait, you can use the Flying Thunder God technique? You bastard. How come you didn't use it against Madara? Sasuke growled furiously. Naruto continued leaping from rooftop to rooftop. He glanced shyly at Sasuke. It never crossed my mind, he admitted, lowering his head. The Uchiha groaned and shook his head. The duo remained silent until they reached their destination half an hour later. It was a wide intersection between Karakura and another city. They detoured off the main road to avoid being seen. As they stared at each other, they finally noticed what each other was wearing. Are you really going to wear your school uniform to this training? Don't you have to change into it in an hour? Sasuke asked, putting a hand to his head. Naruto glanced down at his gray shirt and pants and shrugged. A/N, ignore the white shirt bit from the previous chapter. I was hallucinating. We didn't have time to properly prepare for this training. At least I'm not half naked, he said, gesturing to Sasuke's black sweatpants, which were the only thing he was wearing. What does it matter, let's just keep the technique simple for working on control, Sasuke said, quickly launching himself towards the blonde. Naruto found him halfway there and their fight began. Karakura Institute equals. It was 10 minutes before class, and Naruto and Sasuke were in the classroom. Their fight could have lasted for hours, but the feeling of their clone tugging at them alerted them to the time. They quickly declared a draw and returned home using the Flying Thunder God seal. 20 minutes before school started, Naruto told Sasuke about the previous day's adventure after taking a quick shower. During training, he'd instructed the clone to buy more uniforms. He was grateful he'd used his foresight before the fight. His shirt was still lying around. The clone had also bought a uniform for Sasuke, which the Uchiha regarded with utter disdain. I'm surprised, Naruto. I didn't know you had such a handsome friend, said one of the girls, looking at Sasuke, who was at the back of the class with his head resting on the desk. Yeah, how come he wasn't here yesterday and why doesn't he socialize like you? Michiru added after Mihana. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, chuckling. I wouldn't call him a heartthrob. Besides, I dragged him here, so now he hates me. I told him he just has to hang in there for the rest of the year until summer vacation, Naruto explained. I don't know, he could be your evil twin. They're total opposites, Orihime said, alternating between the two shinobi. The group chuckled softly at Orihime's foolishness, while Sasuke grunted inaudibly. By the window, Ichigo was talking with his friends Kigo and Mizuiro. Sato, nicknamed Chad, a very tall student of Mexican descent, greeted them. Naturally, Kigo paled at his terrifying size, but the fear was never serious, for Chad was a gentle giant. I still can't believe a car drove past your house and nobody got hurt, Kigo said, his voice filled with emotion. I'm surprised that no one has woken up, Mizuiro interjected. Ichigo was too preoccupied with the events of the previous night to listen. It's still unbelievable that no one remembers what happened. I'm sure Karen should remember the hollow attack, but she doesn't recall a thing. Ichigo was lost in thought. Are you Kurosaki Ichigo? Hello, I'm Rukia Kuchiki. I'll sit next to you for now, a girl said, shocking Ichigo to his core. He was about to lose it when she held up her palm, written on a marker were, reveal who I am and I'll kill you. He paled and was surprised that the others hadn't noticed. Naruto smiled and laughed with his group, but he was also watching the new girl with raven hair, partially certain that she was the same person he had seen yesterday. There's something different about her, he reflected as he noticed the teacher enter the classroom and school begin. During class, Naruto, Sasuke, and Ichigo were all tired of Rukia for different reasons. As the hours passed, Sasuke had to admit he'd returned to something he'd missed. He'd always excelled in school, and it was clear Naruto had improved as well. Things have changed, he thought, glancing at the blonde's back. Naruto was getting anxious. In a few minutes, he would be enjoying Orihime's delicious food. He felt someone watching him and glanced back to see Sasuke 2 rows behind him, diagonally. He smiled, and the Uchiha frowned. The 2 shinobi locked eyes, and Sasuke turned to Rukia. Suddenly, Naruto felt a light tap on his forehead. He looked at Tatsuki, who was staring at him. "What did I do?" he whispered. She was sitting behind him and gave him another tap. "You're in my personal space," she said, giving him a third tap. Naruto finally threw his head back with a mock expression of irritation. "Ow, stop doing that," he said before the bell rang throughout the school. "Alright, time to eat." "What did you bring today, Orihime-chan?" he asked his classmate. At that moment, she pulled out an incredibly long sandwich. "Just this one. I call it the Yumwich," she said, beaming with pride at her masterpiece. The sandwich looked like any ordinary Subway roll. Naruto's mouth watered at the sight of the work of art. He watched as she slowly tore off a piece and offered it to him. "Here, try it," he offered, enjoying the attention. Naruto bit into the combination of meat and bread and groaned with pleasure. Although it tasted like any other sandwich, it had something special he couldn't quite put his finger on. He swallowed it, saddened by how quickly he'd gone. "Sasuke, you have to try it. One of the best sandwiches ever made," the sandwich praised its friend. The dark-eyed boy stared at the 30-centimeter tall man from across the room. He grunted in disagreement and lowered his head. "Come on Sasuke, you know you want to. I know you're hungry down there," Naruto added with a smile as the girls giggled at the sound of his stomach rumble. Sasuke let out a long sigh as he stood up. "Alright, I'll try the sandwich," he said, noticing Rukia dragging Ichigo out of the room. He raised an eyebrow at the oddness of it all and kept his senses alert for any unusual activity. He accepted the piece she gave him and ate it in silence. Naruto looked at him apprehensively, waiting for some small clue that he liked him. "Look, it's just a regular sandwich. I'm going to get something to eat somewhere," he said as he left the classroom. Everyone looked at him with frowns. "I knew he'd like it," Naruto said with a wide, sly grin. The girls stared at him in disbelief. "What do you mean?" It was obvious the grumpy guy didn't like Orihime-chan's delicious sandwich, Chizuru said, pulling her into a tight hug. Tatsuki then struggled to separate the lesbian from her friend. It was a funny scene. Naruto smiled smugly and raised a finger as he spoke like a master. "You see, I know Sasuke so well that I'm surprised we aren't blood brothers. He doesn't like to show affection for things he likes. He prefers to maintain a stoic demeanor, just like his older brother, who sadly is no longer with us. But if you pay attention, you'll see small, very small, expressions on his face that he can't hide, because they're more instinctive," he finished, admiring Sasuke's large, incredulous eyes. "Wait," he said, opening his hand and beginning the countdown. When the blonde man reached 0, Sasuke returned to the room. I don't know how to say this. Can I have another one?" Sasuke asked, looking downcast and embarrassed. Naruto flashed his most smug smile and leaned back in his chair. "I told you so," he said as a massive burst of energy erupted from outside, oozing out continuously. The 2 shinobi tensed discreetly, ready for a hollow slaughter, but relaxed when they sensed no harm. After that, the day passed without incident. The 2 shinobi simply decided to head home, though at different times. Naruto wanted to walk Orihime home. He soon learned that she lived near his and Sasuke's apartment. But Tatsuki lived in their complex. As Sasuke discovered on his way home, their obvious shared interest was martial arts. It was strange, but Naruto sensed that Sasuke felt something. Perhaps coming to this world was better than he thought. The monsters gave him the occasional adrenaline rush, it was a shame he could never run up to them and kill them himself. They always seemed to vanish within minutes of appearing. They'd reappear a couple of minutes later, but then disappear completely. Deep down, he knew it had something to do with Ichigo and Rukia, but he had no proof. Maybe Sasuke knew what was going on. Okay, goodbye Naruto-kun, thank you for walking me home, Orihime said, giving a quick bow before running up the stairs. Naruto was amazed to see her gracefully ascend the stairs, dressed in her skirt uniform. A blush adorned her face as she began her journey home. A meow sounded nearby, and he looked down to see a black cat meowing near his legs. Hey, kitty. Want some milk? He asked the cat as it tilted its head and meowed again. I'll take that as a yes, he laughed. Follow me, he said as he ran toward his shared apartment with the cat chasing after him. Naruto ran up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time. He slowed down as he passed his neighbor's door before reaching his own. Here's my place, apartment 18, he said to the cat, pleased when it responded with a meow. He reached into his pocket for the key and cursed silently, remembering that Sasuke hadn't made him a copy. Change of plans, kitty, we'll go through the window. Come on, hop on my shoulder, he said, crouching down so the cat could jump onto him, where it wrapped its tail around the blonde's neck. He stood up in amazement. Wow! You're the smartest cat I've ever met, he said, not noticing the cat puffing out its chest with pride, for it had vague memories of the fire daimyo's wife's cat, which only knew how to avoid danger. He left his apartment and looked for the window. Stupid Sasuke, he's not in the apartment, he mused, sensing Sasuke's signature on another apartment. Always thinking about a fight, Naruto added as he looked around. Seeing no one, he glanced at the cat. Wait, it said, leaping toward his open window, grateful that it had been left open. He slid gracefully through the window and landed on Sasuke's bed. I didn't know this was Sasuke's window, Naruto mused, his face turning pale as he jumped out of bed. If Sasuke finds out I was in his bed, with my shoes on, he'll kill me, Naruto said, quickly leaving the room after brushing off the rumpled bed. The blonde went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Listen to your precious milk. Now, kitten, you have to promise me you won't tell Sasuke I was in his room, okay? She asked. The cat seemed to ignore him, preferring to lick its paw. I'll take that as a thumbs up, said Naruto, taking a medium-sized plate and filling it with milk. He watched the cat climb down from his shoulder and begin to lick the milk. It was at that moment that Sasuke entered through the door. He and the blonde stared at each other for a moment. Hey, I thought you were still Orihime. How did you get in without a key? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Naruto sneered as he stood up. I feel insulted, seriously. I was the leader of an entire shinobi village. Getting into this apartment was a piece of cake, Naruto said, unbuttoning his uniform shirt and taking it off. Now the blonde boy wore a simple white shirt. Then, he placed his fingers in the classic cross seal and summoned a clone. Now I'm going to take a shower. Do my homework, and don't complain, Naruto grumbled as he walked away quickly. Drama queen. Sasuke muttered with a sigh, glancing at the counter where a cat was staring at him. They stared until the sound of the shower turning on filled the apartment. Where did this cat come from, loser? Sasuke yelled through the steaming water. I found her outside, on my way home from Orihime's apartment. She's a very intelligent cat, Naruto added. Did you check their gender? Sasuke asked incredulously. No, I didn't check their gender, was Naruto's response. So how do you know it's her? Sasuke heard Naruto sigh as he sat at the bar, his gaze fixed on the cat. I have a feeling. Can I take a shower in peace? Yeah, it doesn't matter, just don't use all the hot water, Sasuke said, hearing Naruto's growl. So you're a clever cat, he asked the cat, receiving a meow in response. Sasuke stared intently at the cat, searching for something of value. Nothing interesting caught his eye during the 5 minutes he spent observing it. He raised his head and looked at the blonde woman wrapped in the towel. Are you sure this cat is smart? It's done nothing but stare at me for the last 5 minutes. The blonde boy glanced over his shoulder to make sure it was working properly before looking at Sasuke. Looks like you've been staring at it for 5 minutes. You say you're not smart. Naruto chuckled slyly as he ran to his room before a plastic cup hit him. You're lucky it was plastic. Naruto yelled from his room. Whatever. Sasuke scoffed as he prepared to take a shower, leaving the cat on the counter to lick itself. Ichigo's house equals. Ichigo entered his house with a deep sigh. Hey, Ichigo nii, you're just in time for dinner, said Yuzu, happy to see her brother. Ichigo glanced at his sisters in the kitchen and gave them a small smile. How was your day? He asked, his newfound respect for life evident in his family. Karen narrowed her eyes for a moment at her brother's strange behavior. She shrugged after a few seconds and said her day had been like any other. Yuzu didn't object and told her brother about the chores she did, which was practically all she did after coming home from school. Where's Dad? Ichigo asked, realizing his father hadn't punched him. The answer came when Isshin appeared behind him and applied a headlock. Here I am, Ichigo. I'm surprised you let your guard down. What did I tell you about that? Isshin yelled at the end as Ichigo threw him against the wall before storming up the stairs, furious and without appetite. Minutes later, Ichigo lay in his bed, completely oblivious to what was happening around him. He stared absently at the ceiling, thinking about what had happened earlier that day with the Hollow's attack on the little ghost. He recalled the declaration he had made about fulfilling his duty as a substitute Shinigami, not out of obligation, but out of desire. He couldn't stand idly by while an innocent soul was in danger. He wasn't made for that. He went to sleep grateful because the next day was Saturday. The next day, the morning flew by without incident. Naruto was relaxing on the sofa reading a book while the cat slept on the armrest behind his head. Sasuke was with Tatsuki at the dojo, where the blonde was certain that Sasuke was humiliating the group of civilian fighters. Naruto yawned as he felt and heard his stomach rumble. Interrupted, he marked the page, folded the corner, and closed the book with an unnecessarily loud clap. He glanced up over his bangs and saw the black cat staring at him, as if asking why he was doing that. The blonde, mustachioed cat simply smiled at him. It's time to eat, Naruto said, as if he understood the unspoken question. He jumped up and yawned, watching the feline do the same. He went to the kitchen, took out the fish-themed cat food, and poured it into a medium-sized bowl, along with a saucer of milk. Now that you're settled, I'm going to get some food, Naruto said as he walked to his room to change, since he was still in his pajamas. That, and he'd left his book on the bed. A few moments later, he emerged wearing plain black jeans and a black shirt with an orange dragon that burst from the bottom and circled it twice, its head peeking over the blonde's left shoulder. When he, or rather, his clone, saw him in the store, he lit up with excitement, delighted by the vibrant orange. Perhaps he hadn't entirely lost his love for that color after all. She wore black sneakers that perfectly complemented her current outfit. She glanced down at her chest and carefully lifted the necklace Tsunade had given her years ago. She smiled at the thought of her predecessor and tucked the memento into her shirt pocket. He looked around the house and raised an eyebrow when he didn't see the cat anywhere. He shrugged and left the residence. Half an hour of wandering aimlessly through the city looking for a good place to eat was starting to make him nervous. Especially since he was incredibly bored. His eyes lit up when he saw Orihime walking ahead of him, waiting at a crosswalk. She quickened her pace and gave him a light tap on the shoulder, which startled her. Oh, Naruto-kun, konnichiwa, she said with a radiant smile as she gave a brief bow. She was wearing a long, colorful dress. The top was purple, while the bottom was a mix of orange, yellow, and other light colors. Same here, Orihime-chan, Naruto said, bowing in return. What are you doing on this wonderful Saturday? The blonde boy asked with a wide smile that never left his face. She smiled back and laughed a little. I'm just taking a stroll, enjoying the warmth of the sun, she said as the traffic light turned green. They started crossing the street. Naruto was surprised to see that she didn't have a plan. So you're just wandering around aimlessly. How about I change things? Naruto said, delighted by the confused look she gave him. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? The blonde man stared at her the entire time they walked, his eyes never leaving her face. "I was looking for a place to eat. Would you like to join me?" he asked, growing increasingly nervous, as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Of course I'll join you. Now that you mention it, I'm starving," she said quickly, grabbing his hand and practically dragging him to a nearby sushi bar. There they talked about a lot of things, some of which revealed they shared common interests. Karakura number 1 dojo equals. Sasuke stood to one side of the room, which resembled rural Japan. He wore a white karate uniform alongside 16 others, both men and women. The solitary Uchiha had the pleasure of training with a dozen of them. Some were competent fighters for civilians, but against an elite like himself, they were poor. But Tatsuki, despite having the same training as them, seemed to find their ferocity in combat acceptable. If he had chakra and knew how to use it, he would be as strong as any Chunin or even Jonin of Oto. He glanced at the center of the room, where the girl was training against a tall, dark-haired man. She was so graceful, dodging and landing blows. He was about to activate his bloodline just to record this forever. He was about to try it when he felt a tap on his shoulder. To his left stood most, if not all, of the students, along with the sensei. They were performing rapid bows, completing 10 falls and stand-ups in 5 seconds. "We would all be honored if you joined this dojo and participated in the wrestling tournament next month," said the light brown-haired sensei. Sasuke looked at the middle-aged man with a smile playing at the corners of his lips. That's a tempting offer, but I wouldn't gain anything from it," he said as a scream nearly burst his eardrums, "and everyone else's." "Nothing to gain," Tatsuki said, approaching the Uchiha furiously, her back blazing and her eyes burning. "There's so much to gain by participating in this tournament. It's not just a matter for the town, this tournament will test the skills of the strongest fighters in the country. The winner will receive the recognition of their peers and a prestigious trophy. And next month, I'll become the strongest fighter in the country." The impassioned monologue left her breathless. By the time she finished, she had Sasuke's shirt front in her hand, shaking it frantically. At the end of her speech, the audience shed tears of recognition and awe at her impassioned speech. But Sasuke was the most moved, judging by the swirls that formed in his eyes. Her frenzied trembling had left him momentarily stunned. He felt dizzy as he calmed down, barely able to acknowledge the strength every woman acquires when she is angry. "You don't understand what I was implying, Tatsuki-chan. I'm trying to say that I already know I'm the strongest. Although it's hard for me to admit, there's someone who's my equal in strength," he stammered. He shook his head to stop himself from saying anything else. "Forget what I said. Of course, I'll join the dojo and participate in the tournament. I'm sure you'll have plenty of students afterward," Sasuke said, standing up. He took Tatsuki's hand, surprising her as they led her to the center of the room. "Now, let's get you in shape. When I'm done with you, you'll start feeling sorry for the other contestants. Who knows, maybe next year they'll let you compete with the boys," Sasuke said as he practiced an expert taijutsu technique his clan was known for. With the substitute Shinigami equals. The day was bright and the sun was high in the sky. Ichigo was glad that a day like this wasn't accompanied by hollows, at least for the time being. The absence of hollows allowed him and Rukia a brief but much-needed rest. Even though it was only his second day as a substitute Shinigami, he had already killed 2 hollows. The orange-haired teenager wore a white and blue shirt with a skull in the center, surrounded by blue flames. His pants were dark blue. Rukia, for her part, wore a matching white and blue dress. "Don't get too comfortable, Ichigo. We both know a hollow could appear, and will appear, at any moment," Rukia said, dampening his spirits. Now, a sour expression was etched on Ichigo's face, just like any other day. He sighed as he thought about what he wanted to do that day. Nothing came to mind, so he simply continued wandering around the city, giving Rukia a human tour. One thing he noticed about the short girl was that, when caught off guard, she was direct, though no one seemed to notice. They had run into 2 classmates earlier, and as they approached, Rukia simply asked, "Who were you?" Luckily, Ichigo managed to distract them long enough that they didn't hear him. By then, they both heard a loud crash nearby. A little further on, about 30 centimeters away in the street, lay the new blonde boy and Orihime on the ground. She rushed to the scene immediately. She gasped when she saw Naruto tenderly embracing Orihime, who had likely taken the brunt of the attack. The attacking car was nowhere to be seen, only a few skid marks indicated its presence. That, and a pile of vegetables scattered on the ground. "Are you alright?" Ichigo asked as the two slowly stood up. And as he suspected, Orihime was unharmed, while, oddly enough, neither was Naruto. "Yes, Ichigo-kun, I'm fine. It was just a minor bump," she said, giving herself a comical tap on the head before bowing to Naruto. "Thank you, Naruto-kun, for protecting me." The blonde boy had been lost in thought until he shook his head. He rubbed the back of his neck and chuckled. "It was nothing, Orihime-chan. Just a little bump." It was nothing like Jiraiya's Rasengan or Tsunade-bachan's punches, he thought, pleased with the contrast. Orihime then noticed something around her. "Rukia-san," she murmured before mustering her courage and bowing. "Hello, Rukia-san," she said, bowing to her companion. "Who the hell are you?" she said before Ichigo quickly silenced her. "That's Inoue, our classmate," he said in an angry whisper. "Oh, Inoue-chan, how are you?" Rukia said as her character did a 180-degree turn, bowing. It was with that bow that she noticed something around her ankle. It was a mark, as if someone or something had grabbed it. "What's that on your leg?" she asked, crouching down to get a better look. Meanwhile, Naruto was lost in thought and, luckily, overheard everything that was being said. So he glanced at Orihime's bruise. A flash of recognition popped into his mind as things became clearer. He didn't voice his thoughts, he just stood there. Ichigo had been watching Naruto out of the corner of his eye, but he couldn't get anything out of the shinobi. Naruto felt like he was being watched and quickly glanced at Ichigo. They met, and that contact revealed something to Ichigo, something he thought he'd never see. It was as if a huge, spectral fox was right behind him, with 9 long tails dangling from its back. The fox's face was menacing, displaying rows of razor-sharp teeth as it roared at him. He shuddered at the contact and immediately looked down at the ground. The blond man smiled inwardly, for that small display of power through eye contact might have been too much. It was only a bit of directional ki, but instead of being external for many to sense, it was internal, so only one person would feel a sliver of his power. That person was the one he was looking at. He hadn't used that kind of technique before his fusion with the Kyuubi. "Now I just have to wait for him to start following me around to spy on me," he thought. It was so simple that he mentally slapped himself for not realizing it sooner. Whatever this girl Rukia was, she somehow gave Ichigo that power, and now here we are. Whatever it was, it had something to do with the dead and the monsters he'd been sensing before they disappeared. Now let's get back to reality. "Come on, Naruto-kun, we need to go back to the store to buy more food for tonight," she said quickly, grabbing his hand and pulling him along. A few strange hours later. The sun had disappeared from the sky, only to be replaced by the moon. Its luminous glow shone and marked the end of the day. Everyone began to surrender to the night, awaiting the moment to ascend to the world of dreams and rest. Naruto wasn't one of those people. He and Orihime were at her house, waiting for their guest, Tatsuki. Orihime had explained that they met at her house every Saturday for dinner. Orihime had no family to take care of her after her brother's death 6 years earlier. She was 9 years old then. Naruto felt saddened by the story, since Orihime had a family and had lost them. She and Sasuke shared that loss. But Naruto smiled gently as he listened to the girl talk about her brother and how much he loved her more than anything. "Sora seems like the best brother in the world," Naruto whispered softly, for he had always longed for the feeling of family, of a true blood family. Orihime smiled sadly as she thought of her late brother. "Yes, he was the best," she said, looking at Naruto and seeing his sad face. She didn't know why he was sad, but she felt bad that she was the cause. "It's okay, Naruto-kun, don't be sad. Here, have some buns," she said, running to the kitchen of the small apartment and giving Naruto a bun in the living room. The blonde with the mustache thanked him, took a bite, and savored the sweetness. Hey, Naruto-kun, can I ask you a question? Orihime asked, a little nervous, since she couldn't look him in the eyes. The blonde smiled. Well, you already did it, but go ahead, she said, giving him a big smile. She raised a trembling finger toward his face. See, can I touch your whiskers? She asked shyly, blushing. Naruto blushed deeply, for he knew exactly what would happen if someone touched his whiskers. The blonde boy was in a desperate situation. If he let her stroke his whiskers, she might do something that jeopardized their friendship, but if he refused, she might be saddened, since it was obvious he'd wanted to do it ever since she'd seen them a couple of days ago. Sighing in defeat, he nodded and awaited the sensational assault. A soft hand caressed his bearded cheek. The blonde moaned inaudibly as his fingers traced the length of his beard. He couldn't contain himself as he leaned in close enough to quickly plant his lips against hers in a chaste kiss. It was at that moment that the door opened and Tatsuki and Sasuke entered the residence. They were both speechless when they saw them kissing.